Welcome back in the evening time on the East Coast. Welcome back to another live feed of Rashawn Mitchell's YouTube channel. Let's get into it, man. We're gonna talk about the next '86 Miami Hurricanes, man. They may be arguably the greatest team never to win a national championship. Make a possibility of that, man. That team was a great team 40 years ago, man. That team was a dominant team. They should have won the national championship. Yes, they had a lot of success after that, but that team may have been the greatest team never to win a national championship, arguably. Yeah, there's some other teams that had great teams that should have won a national championship. I go back to, as far as Hurricanes are concerned, the '92 team. I think they should have won the national championship. They lost to Alabama, and also we go back to 2002 Hurricanes. That team was loaded. They should have won that championship. You look at the history of the Hurricanes. That teams that should have won that championship definitely should have been 1986 team because they were so loaded. Lee Testberry won the Heisman. For one, you had two great players in the backfield. They were loaded. Lonzo Highsmith, Melvin Bratton, Warren Williams. This team was uber talented. You know, they should have won that championship. And that was the year where you hated Miami. They wore them fatigues coming off the plane and stuff like that in Arizona. You know, Jerome Brown saying stuff at the dinner, the things that he said. You know, how they put out the fatigues and stuff like that. If you watch the U documentary, he said some stuff. Some comments I ain't gonna say on this live feed, but that was a big deal in terms of what he did in that dinner with featuring the Penn State Nittany Lions, who beat Miami the 8-7 Fiesta Bowl. And he said some things that he hadn't been saying. You think you should have said, but he said it. And everybody left, got up and went. That team was just a great team. And they should have won that championship. There's no way to say it. That team should have won that championship back in '86. That '86 team was a great team. Again, when you look at the wide receiver core, you had Michael Irvin, who was only a sophomore. Then you had Brian Blades, Brett Perryman. That was the squad, man. That was the core, wide receiving core. Then you look at the tight end position, you had Charles Henry and Freddie Roberts. Pretty good offensive line. Then you look at the defense, you had Benny and the Jets. You had Tolbert Bain, Darrell Fulton. I think Bo McDowell was on the team, but I don't think he was starting. Obviously, you had Benny Blades. That's what we call Benny and the Jets. That's the nickname that they had from '85 to '87, the Benny and the Jets. You had Sterling Brown, Tolbert Bain, Darrell Fulton, and you had Benny Blades and Donald Ellis. Donald Ellis was on that secondary. So there's a lot of high expectation because they had lost in '85 to Tennessee in the Sugar Bowl, in a game with which Miami they cost them the national championship in '85. So the expectation was high for 1986 because they could have won it in '85 because remember in '85 they beat Notre Dame 58-7. That rose their status up. I think it was like in the top 5, top 3. They could have won that championship, but they fell short in the Sugar Bowl to Tennessee. So '86 comes around. That was supposed to be the year. And they may go down as arguably the greatest football team not to win that championship. Look at the roster that they had. They opened the season up at number 3. They went over to South Carolina. They beat South Carolina 34-14 in front of the fans at Williams-Brice Stadium. Irvin had 6 catches, 101 yards. Melvin Bratton had 105 yards, 3 touchdowns on the ground. Dominant performance to start the season. And they go on the road again to Florida. They win that game 23-15. They was losing 9-7 at halftime, and they scored 69 extra points in the second half. Won that game 23-15. They rolled past Texas the following week. And the moment of the year obviously was number 1 versus number 2, because Oklahoma at the time was preseason, but they was number 1. They were defending champions because they won the national championship in '85. That's the same year Miami beat Oklahoma and Oklahoma, but Oklahoma and Miami number one versus number two. You got Vinny Testaverde, Boz, Brian Bosworth, and Jimmy Johnson hated Oklahoma from his time as a head coach at Oklahoma State, and it was number one versus number two. And in '85, Miami went into number one Oklahoma and won 27-14, the game which Miami knocked out Troy Aikman. Remember, Troy Aikman wasn't always a U Slade Bruin. He used to be a quarterback for the Oklahoma Sooners. And the Sooners get the last time win that championship. And Oklahoma talking trash. Like Brian Bursworth wanted revenge at the Orange Bowl in '86. The Vols talk will talk, but the Canes walked the walk. They won 28-16. Oklahoma had come into the game giving up only 3 points on defense, averaging 50.5 points per game offensively. And then you had, like, before the game, the coin toss where Alonzo Highsmith, talking trash to the captains. I mean, you had Winston Moss, you had Jerome Brown, all that sweating over his face, and I mean, just crazy stuff. That's how it was at the time. The Hurricanes intimidated people before the kickoff. They talked trash, and Miami set the tone. They delivered one of the biggest wins in the program's history. Testaverde had Heisman moment, 4 touchdowns, including a great run against the defense. He scrambled, ran around, great run. The wishbone offense couldn't be, can have no success because that Miami defense, man, they held 186 yards of offense. That Miami team on defense was fast. They were fast. They were very explosive. Type of offense, that type of defense as far as aggressiveness. And Oklahoma would go 33-3 from 1985 to 1987, with all 3 losses coming at the hands of Miami. So Miami was on cruise control. They dominated the competition, 34-0, 58-14, 45-13, 41-23, 37-10, 23-10, 36-10. Only competitive game was against Florida State. The Canes were able to pull away in the fourth quarter, win by 18, 41-23. That was a game right there, by 18 points. But it all went wrong, man. And they faced the Penn State Nittany Lions. That's the thing about it, man. Like, things didn't go so right. I also said that Vinny Testaverde got into a scooter accident. May have been the beginning of the end for Miami's national championship dreams because Vinny Testaverde missed the season finale versus East Carolina. He had bruises, scrapes, and soreness. So maybe he wasn't able to play well because of that. He looked rusty in the Fiesta Bowl at the win of Heisman. 5 interceptions. He was terrible. And Miami should have won the game because they outgained Penn State 445 yards, so 162 yards, and they had 22 first downs. And Penn State only had 8. So they still had a chance. But he throws interception, picked off. Again, the fatigues, that's what's iconic about that team. It's them coming off the plane, the fatigues on, and the steak fry stuff that was said with Jerome Brown. I won't repeat what he said. But the steak fry, that was infamous. An infamous steak fry. With Penn State, Miami players were there together, and he said stuff that he said, but it wasn't no good. Infamous steak fry. That's how it was at that time, man. Miami had swagger. The team that you love to hate at that time, because the swagger and what they did, how they carried themselves. It wasn't what college football was about. They broke tradition. It was anti-establishment in a sense. Yep, that's how it was at that time. Steak fry. Yeah, he said no. In the army, he moves his warm up top. He said, "Did the Japanese sit down with Pearl Harbor before they bombed them?" That's what he said. And heard him say Sunday. Then, when his teammates answered no, Brown directed the Hurricanes out because there's some racial slurs that were said by some of the Penn State players. Something about Jimmy Johnson's hairstyle, joking about the black players eat at the training table once a week. White members of this team allow black players to eat at the training table once a week, all this sort of stuff. And that's why he said what he said. So that's where it was, man. That's how it was at that time. The infamous state fraud, that's infamous. That's how it was. So that's how it was. People looked at Miami as outlaws, the way they carried themselves and how they conduct themselves. People didn't like it. But the Miami backed it up. They backed up what they were about, and that's it. That's all you could do. So as I continue on with this, look at the Miami '86 team. Yeah, it was a bad time to play bad football when it comes to that. The Hurricanes, they played their worst game of the year. They outgained them. They did everything right, but they just didn't take care of the football. They was loaded as a roster, man. They had star players on both sides of the ball. Getting Vinny Testaverde threw 26 touchdowns. And that's his final game as a football player before he went to the draft. Um, they had a great, sophisticated, offensive passing game, averaging 260 yards a game through the air. Getting Melvin Bratton, Alonzo Highsmith, Warren Williams. They combined for 1,900 yards, almost from scrimmage for 21 touchdowns. Irvin was doing his thing. Again, he was only a sophomore. Irvin. Brett Perriman, Brian Blades. They combined for 19 touchdowns. They were very explosive. Receiving core. Then defensively, you had Danny Stubbs and was a terror as a pass rusher. Jerome Brown doing his thing, D tackle. George Meyer Jr. attacking the machine. Benny Blades had 10 interceptions. They were loaded. And the reason why they may have been the greatest because they dominate everyone during the season was never really threatened until the Fiesta Bowl. Their closest regular season win was 8 points, which they won at Florida. They had the third best offense in the country. They averaged 35.8 points per game. The fourth best defense, surrendering only 12.5 points per game. Vinny Testaverde swept most of the major offensive awards during that year. He won the Heisman, including Walter Camp Award, Maxwell O'Brien Awards during his outstanding senior season. Then the '87 draft, you got Vinny Testaverde going first. Lawrence Heisman went third. Jerome Brown went ninth. Now you had 5 of the top 50 picks and 6 guys taken in the first 3 rounds. Then 1988, Michael Irvin and Benny Blades become first round selections, and 12 Canes were picked in the draft. 1989 saw 6 more Hurricanes make it to the NFL. So if Miami would have won that championship, they would have been the greatest team ever. I believe so. That team was so stacked. That team was stacked. Stacked with talent. They should have won the national championship that year. So that concludes this look at the 1986 Miami Hurricanes. Hopefully hit the like button and support the channel. Appreciate it. Helps the channel, obviously. And subscribe. So that's it. Looking at the 1986 Miami Hurricanes. Arguably the greatest team never to win a national championship. That's what this topic was about. 1986 Miami Hurricanes. Arguably the greatest team never to win a national championship. So I'll be back with another live feed at the bottom of the hour at 6:30. Until then, talk to you soon.